Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to show you how to make the radial design that also has some linear components for the skull that I know a lot of you guys wanted to know how to do. So starting off, we're actually going to be folding this in half, just like you would for the linear symmetry, but you're only going to fold it the one time. So I'm just folding it, making sure that my corners match and that the edges are all matched up and not wonky. Then you're going to need a pencil. This is not one that you're just going to free cut. You do need to plan it out before. So the first shape that I'm drawing is going to be kind of like a hook or a sickle, depending on your knowledge of tools. But it's not going to be just a straight line. You want to make sure that it is thick. So I'm actually going to draw like a shape. So as you can see right now, I'm going back over and I'm doing a second line. So I'm going to cut out this whole shape, making sure that I leave some of the paper so that it's still attached. As you're cutting, you'll see that this is a really delicate part, and you need to be really careful when you're folding the paper and when you're using your scissors. This is where using small scissors, or if you are able to use like an X-acto knife or a cutting tool, it would be really beneficial. Now I'm also planning out like the eye and where I would want the eye to be. I want the eyes to be kind of a heart shape, so I'm just drawing half a heart, and then this will help me later when I do the next fold in the center of the face. So the eyes are not being cut right now. I'm just putting them in for planning purposes. So I'm finishing up putting the other shapes in. Now I know that it's hard to see in the video, but there's actually a small space between the little rectangle that I just drew that goes to the side and the kind of handle of the hook that I drew before. So make sure that you leave that little space uncut, because that's what's going to hold it all together. If you accidentally overlap your cuts, or if you cut too much, then obviously you're just going to have a big sort of like skull shape, light bulb shaped hole. This part down here is like the teeth of the skull. Again, it's really simple. It's definitely not a realistic skull, but when you cut it out, it makes a really effective design. And since my skull needs a nose, I'm going to go ahead and do another like half heart shape, but upside down for the nose hole. And I can cut that now since it's going to be in directly the middle of the face. Remember, the eyes will happen later. So be really careful when you're doing this part. Like I said before, you need to be really gentle. And go slow. There's no need to go fast. Make sure that you're cutting along the lines, but also make sure that you leave those spaces that you created when you were drawing alone, and you don't cut them out. That way your design stays together and doesn't come out in one big hole. So this is where you guys need to be a little bit more gentle with your folding and cutting. So there's that tiny space I'm pointing to between, I guess, like the top of the mouth and the side of the face. There's just a little piece of paper that's holding it all together, so just be really, really gentle with it. When you're folding, especially for the eyes, when you're going to cut the eyes out, you've got to be really, really careful with that. But if it does break, you can always put it back together with just like a tiny piece of tape. It's not too big a deal, but if it does come out, it's frustrating. This part was really hard for me. In retrospect, I think maybe I would have cut like a shape that had like zigzag lines rather than these like square robot castle sort of lines for the teeth, just to make it a little easier on myself, or maybe some bumpy lines. going up and in between each tooth is a little bit difficult without an X-acto knife or a cutting tool. To do it with scissors is a difficult task, and I would suggest doing something a little bit different. But if this is the look that you're going for, definitely try to use an X-acto knife if you have one at home, or if you're in class, I have one that you could borrow, and I'm happy to show you how to use it if you've never used one before. But it's definitely difficult to do this cutting with the scissors. So now we've got all of the middle line linear symmetry design cut out. So you can see we've got the nose, the teeth, and the outline of the head. Looks pretty good. Basically, you're looking for like a light bulb shape. So now we need to do the eyes, and to do that, the center part of the face, I'm not going to fold the whole thing. I'm just folding like the face, which is why you need to be very gentle. And this is also why I drew half of one of the eyes before. So it's kind of like my guideline. And then I make sure that on both sides, like the folds match, because I'm just going to cut once. So I'm going to cut out half of a heart shape, roughly. And I should end up with two eyes because of the way that I folded it. So if you look at your fold, it should be something like from the top, it should be like a W or an M. If you don't see that, if it looks like a V, don't cut, because you're going to end up with something completely different. You're not going to end up with two eyes, or you're going to end up with half a head. This is also very difficult because I'm trying to be gentle here. So again, super important to be gentle, because you do not want to rip that face off that you created, because then you'll end up with a zombie skeleton, which I think is a little bit backwards. But anyways. Awesome. So now we've got eyes, nose, mouth, sides of face. So now we need to make the radial components of the design. So if you have done the radial design before, you know that you need to fold it in half and then in half again to create quarters of the paper. And then from there, you fold it into a triangle with the center of the overall paper being the high point of that triangle. So right now, since my skeleton skull is the center point of the design, I don't necessarily need to fold that face in on itself, just the other papers in order to make the design, because those aren't going to be cut anyways. Keep in mind that you've got a bunch of cuts in the center of your paper. Pay careful attention to what designs you're cutting out of the sides of the triangle, because you don't want to overlap the cuts of your skeleton. Otherwise, everything will start kind of falling apart, and you'll lose the design that you've created, that you spent so long to make. And just like with the other radial designs, you're going to cut a few shapes out of each side, open it up, and then you can see what you have for negative space as well. So I'm going to speed up this part so that you guys can see it kind of in its ending form. I drew some designs on this one to plan it out a little better. I think at this point you could probably do some art jazz and freestyle rather than doing so much planning, but that'll be up to you. Okay, so I'm going to speed it up from here so you guys can see the process a little bit more quickly.